Okay, so this video really aims to give you an overview of your AS year and some advice and some guidance in some terms of some of the content and what can make life easier for you throughout the year. So to start off with, obviously there's a difference between how you studied and what you studied at GCSE level and what you will study and how you'll study at AS level. Essentially, there's a massive difference in terms of the volume of the theory content you're going to have to learn this year. So that often comes as a little bit of a shock to AS students, something to be mindful of. You really won't have lessons where you are there to play. Now, you certainly will have had that in core PE at school, and you may have had quite a lot of practical performance stuff in GCSE. At A level, really the practical assessments are done in your own time. Lessons are predominant for theory. We may do the odd little bit of practical, but that will be to teach you something through it, so some theory through the practical activity. You need to recognise that you'll be essentially learning three mini subjects. So ASPE has three different sections, which I'll mention in a moment, and there's a massive jump up in terms of the expectation of the language you need to use when you're writing answers and the specific subject terminology. Without that terminology, you really are sort of not showing yourself at an A-level standard student. And finally, at GCSE there was very much a bias towards the practical performance and less theory, but this at AS and at A2 it's the other way around. You'll see in the percentages I'll show you in a minute, it's very much about knowing things for the exam, although practicals do have their place. So let's go to the exam then. You sit a single exam paper in the summer. There are no January exams anymore, and the single exam paper with all your theory content in it is worth 60% of your final AS grade. You'll be assessed in two practical sports, which is worth 30%, and then 10%, the 10% to make up the 40 comes from a verbal, the EPIP here. Now you might have done that at GCSE. So the two sports make up 30, 10% from the EPIP gives you the 40%. So clearly here you can see the bias towards the theory. As I mentioned earlier, there are three separate sections which you will study through your AS year. We've colour-coded them to obviously try and help you organise and recognise which is which. So our blue section is the socio-cultural studies section, and this really looks at social issues, cultural issues in sport, how sports evolved, and it leads into, in the A2 second year, the history of PE, history of sport. We then have our yellow section, anatomy and physiology. This is the sciencey section, and in the second year it goes specifically into exercise physiology, so develops further. And thirdly, acquiring movement skills, our pink section. Now this is very much to do with the cognitive, the brain processes, how you learn, memory, how you decide which skill to play at a certain time. So how you acquire skilled movements. And the 30 marks there basically shows the breakdown of the marks that are available in the exam paper, so 30 for each of those three sections. The exam is actually a 2-hour exam, and as I said, divided into three sections, so you've got roughly 40 minutes per section. So how can we help you learn? What's there to help you learn? You should already have a textbook, hopefully. I strongly advise you get a 4-colour pen like this one, or have different coloured pens, which are brilliant for notes and also will be very helpful in terms of how I try to coach you in answering exam questions. There's method in that madness, so getting one of those pens is really valuable. Always come with note paper, always bring the relevant booklets or materials that we're using at the time. I'll always remind you of that. We will go through an induction process and you will learn some study skills as we go. There's stuff available to you. I've produced stuff, so hopefully that will help you. The VLE, which I will again introduce you to, incredibly helpful in terms of resources and finding what you need to do for your homework or things to help you study. And finally, there are bits and bobs on a website I am creating, so that might also be an additional resource. So your AS year is comprised of 4 lessons. You will prior to those lessons, be expected to do some independent study and learn some fundamentals. Now, it could be I ask you to watch one of the videos I've made or do a specific piece of work towards that. So that is fundamental learning prior to lessons that you are absolutely expected to do. And then you come to lessons and you'll have 3 active learning lessons where we will develop what you've learnt in your fundamentals. So this fundamental learning really leads into this and means we can do much more interactive activities. You will have booklets for each topic, and that is your business to complete those. I will be checking that they are completed, but the booklets that we give you are not necessarily going to be used in lessons in terms of copying stuff off the board. We want to move away from that. And then your 4th lesson will be an assessment lesson. So every week there'll be an assessment session. You'll be tested on stuff you've learnt previously, and we will look at and monitor those results as we go along. So it's really quite important that we do well in that, or you do well in those along the way. Here's just a little image to show you the YouTube channel that I've created. So if you look up Lynn's Taverner, you should see this YouTube account, and you can see here ASP Sociocultural Studies, ASP Anatomy and Physiology, and the 3rd Acquiring Movement Skills one, and a Study Skills. Now those 4 playlists are the ones that you'll need to keep an eye on, and that's where I'll put my resources that hopefully will help you in your studies. Just a bit of insight really into the sort of exam questions you might get. They come in different sort of challenges or different sort of levels. The AO1 questions are the shorter mark questions, and they're very much about knowledge. So you might have an identify verb, identify this, or list this, or outline this. Very much about knowledge and knowing stuff. You might get slightly more challenging questions then, are kind of mid-range questions which ask you to explain something, and they're requiring you to give a little bit more depth to your answers and work harder to gain those marks. And then our AO3 level questions are longer questions, or the 10-mark essay question. You might find verbs like analyse or evaluate, and they clearly demand you to synthesize information, to present an idea and maybe challenge an idea. So look at advantages or disadvantages. So we've got 3 sort of levels of demand in terms of the questions you might come across. As I mentioned earlier, you'll be expected to give some time to prepare before lessons, and obviously do study post lessons also. So college pretty much expects you to match what you do at home or in your own time with what you have in terms of contact time, so 4 hours. The lesson learning will be the sort of what we do, and what you benefit, how you benefit from the lessons will be really limited if you don't do that fundamentals learning, that prep learning that I set you. Here's just an idea of some of the study skills and things that we'll do in the induction. As I said, I'll show you the website, the VLE. It's important that you stick to homework deadlines or assessment deadlines. I'll mention this SRF process in a minute. Even as far as how to make notes, I assume often that students know how to do this, but quite often that's done poorly. How to answer short answer or extended answer exam questions, and how to revise. We'll develop those things for you as you go. If you find that you're stuck with something and you've done all that you can, you've checked textbooks, you've checked the internet, you've checked the study skills or the materials on the videos to help you, and you're still stuck, you can request a subject extension, which might be me sat with you for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour to try to sort it out. Or directed study can be really valuable, where learning support staff are there just to help you out if it's perhaps to do with how to write things or answer things. Whatever you do, please communicate. So it would be much better for you to contact me to say you're struggling with something than to sit through, avoid, not do things. The VLE, I have a homework block where I every week will summarise the homework that you're expected to do, so always monitor that. Facebook is a really, really good way of reminding you things or putting something out there or giving you messages, so please respond to that. And as I said, I might be using the website also, so it's also a way. Email l.taverner@basvic.ac.uk will always get to me. So please keep in contact with me so that none of us have any shocks with what's going on with you. I mentioned earlier weekly assessment lessons, so that's a fantastic way for yourself and for me to check out how your progress is going. It's important feedback for us all. There are going to be 3 mini mocks, so simulated exams where you'll study a variety of questions and topics, and a final full mock nearer the end of the year before you sit your exam in the summer. Briefly, although we'll obviously develop this and go through this in lessons regularly, this is a really simple way of thinking about how to answer an exam question. If you follow this process, you won't go too far wrong as long as you know the knowledge content also. So P for make a point, E for explain your point, so don't just say something, develop it or explain it, what you mean. E for examples, always give a relevant sporting skill example. And D, if it's appropriate to the demand of the question, develop your answer. Maybe give a contradictory point. So you might say, however, da-di-da-di-da. So PEED is a really simple acronym for how to write exam question answers. If things are beginning perhaps to be a concern, so maybe you're not achieving the right grades you should be achieving, or you're really struggling, or hopefully not, but you're not attending, then it might be that we try to support you in going through this process of SRS process. And the first level of that is the green action plan, where I might raise some concerns, set some action plans for you to achieve in a set time. Hopefully you do that and you'll come off. If you don't achieve those targets in that action plan time, then you might go up to amber, which becomes a little bit more serious and heads of department are involved. And for, if again you're not responding or things aren't going well, then red action plan is very, very serious. You're basically jeopardizing your place on the course, parents are involved, and we have to review quite seriously whether you stay on the course. Throughout the year, we'll talk about how to do exams and how to do exam questions, but my advice really is to prepare your revision materials as you go through the year, rather than have a load to do at the end. So you need to know how you best revise and do this, as I said, as an ongoing process. Are you an auditory learner, i.e. you listen and you learn? In which case, make voice recordings of your notes and listen to them on the bus. There's loads of different ways in which you can revise, and we'll look at some of these. So Study Blue, Flipboard, summary sheets, Inspiration 8, flashcards, PowerPoint slides, different little mnemonics, practicing exam questions and using mark schemes. There's just a few, but you need to find what suits you and helps you learn the best. Finally then, looking at practical grades. So we've established that practical grades are worth a total of 40%. Each of the 2 sports that you're assessed in practically is worth 15%. You need to choose your 2 sports, and it's your responsibility, if required, to get video evidence for these sports. And you need to submit all of this video evidence and the grades by the 25th of October. So you will have been given some sheets. Those need to be completed and given back. If you're being marked externally by a coach, they need to have the specification assessment requirements, and they need to grade you and sign the sheet and send it back as early as possible, preferably before this date. So the sooner we wrap up the practical grades, the better. Finally then, you'll have a verbal assessment after Christmas, and a lot of the learning that you do in class will help prepare you for your verbal assessment. If you put the effort in, you can get great grades, and it's worth up to 10% of your AS grade. So every topic you learn throughout the year up until then might be relevant to apply into that verbal assessment. And you choose one sport, the sport that you can talk most technically about, to do for your verbal assessment.